Hi, welcome back to Faith and Conviction, and I'm your host, Ray Harris, and we're going over this week's Torah portion out of the Law of Moses, the books of Moses, the Torah as it's called by the Hebrews. And want to tell you which portion it is this week that we're going to go over, and it's Parashah, or portion 8, and that comes from the book of Genesis, or said in Hebrew, Bereshit, and it's chapter 32, verse 4, or verse 3, depending on which translation that you're in, through chapter 36, verse 43. So that's our Torah portion for this week, and the English words on that is He sent, and I think it's pronounced Vayishlach. So I hope that I said that right. I'm just doing the best that I know, and forgive me if I mispronounce. But that Hebrew word for that Torah portion comes from the first Hebrew word there in chapter 32, verse 4 or verse 3, depending on which translation you're looking at. So it's very interesting that we see that. So our habit is just looking at the keywords, and we're going to do that for this year. So what is He sent? Well, we look at the Strong's number, and that's H7971. 7971. And from what I understand, it's Shalach. And Brown Driver Briggs gives us a little bit of explanation on this, and it has a lot of application. And so again, I encourage you to go to faithandconviction.org and see more under this video to get you some more correspondence about what's going on with this definition. But for us right now, it's to send away, to let go, and to stretch out. So there's some various meanings to this word. And when we look at this Torah portion there in chapter 32, there's a lot of sending out or going that's going to take place that involves Jacob. So it's actually very important. And as I was studying this, I found that this Hebrew word happens 5 times here in this chapter of 32. And in verse 3 of chapter 32, and I'm using the King James here, it says, Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau. So he's actually having messengers sent for him. In verse 5, it says, I have sent to tell my Lord that I may find grace in your sight. Now again, that's the King James, but it's a repetitiveness of this word sent, this Hebrew word. Down in verse 18, it says, it is a present sent unto my Lord. And Jacob's saying that his Lord is Esau. So this is actually very interesting. So we see that he sent messengers, he being Jacob, sent messengers, and he sent that in order to find grace in the sight of Esau, and he sent a present to Esau. These are some of the things that happen here in chapter 32. But look down at verse 26. This is where Jacob is wrestling with the man or the angel, depending on how you want to interpret that and what translation you're reading. But it's very interesting, because this Hebrew word is again found here in this chapter. And in verse 26, or verse 27, depending on your translation, he said, now that's the man that's wrestling with Jacob, he said, let me go, for the day breaks. And he, Jacob, responded, I will not let you go, except you bless me. So the Hebrew word behind this word go is the same Hebrew word for this sent that we were talking about. This is a very interesting thing. How many things are happening in this chapter and in this Torah portion about sending and going. And it's very interesting when you sit down and you're looking at this on a topic, since it's right here in our discussion. Jacob is wrestling with God. Jacob is wrestling with a manifestation of God or a representative of God, however you might want to interpret this. But whatever you want to interpret it as, Jacob is wrestling. And Jacob is very adamant that he's not going to let this event end, even though he's been hit in the hip, until he receives a blessing. So there's a lesson there for us as well. But I was wanting to tie this in to the New Testament. And I'm looking at this, how, you guys know this, I have a desire to see the Hebrew and the Greek and how all these things interact. So I went to the Septuagint. I'm looking at the translation of this verse in the Greek Old Testament. And if I can get my pronunciation right, it's actually very profound. And it gives some insight here to the New Testament, I think. And it's pronounced Apostelen de Jacob Angelus ep prosthen autou pros esau. So there with that Greek, and again, that Greek, you can find it on the webpage there at faithandconviction.org. I'm going to have it there. We can see with this Greek that there's actually two Greek words that get used over and over and over in the New Testament. And one of those words is apostelen. And that's Greek word 649. Now the verb that goes with that is apostelo. And that means to send away, to allow one to depart, to order one to depart. And you learn that from Thayer. And we were using the Strong's numbers to see all these things. But what's interesting is that we have this word apostelo. Now that's the root verb on that for the Greek. But from apostelo, we also get the word apostolos, which is how we get the English word apostle. And what's interesting with all these things is that we can learn from right here how the Greek is translating it, that part of the idea of an apostle is one who is sent. So Jacob sent messengers in front of him. And the word angelus there for the Greek translates it as messengers. So it's actually very interesting, just the two words that sit here for the Greek, which come from our Greek New Testaments, which help us understand some things. But I wanted to connect this back over to the Messiah as well. And I think it's very important that we see that he sends some people out. So we go over to Matthew chapter 10. Begin with verse 1, and we're just going to stop right at verse 5. But the concept of these 4 or 5 verses that we are looking at is Jesus calls the 12. And we know this 12, they're enumerated there, but I'll just say them. It's Simon, it's Andrew, Simon being Peter, Andrew, James, John, Philip, Bartholomew, Thomas, Matthew, who is also Levi, James, Thaddeus, Simon the Canaanite, and Judas Iscariot. So these 12. But what's interesting for us is when you get down into verse 5, it says that these 12 Jesus sent forth. That's what the King James says. And the Greek word behind sent forth is apostelen. The exact same Greek word used for Jacob back in Genesis chapter 32, verse 3 or verse 4, depending on your translation. That's what the Greek word was in the Septuagint, apostelen, from the Greek word apostolo. So, sent. He sent. Jacob sent. The Messiah sent. So what are we again seeing? The connection of Moses and the connection of the Messiah. The power of Moses and the power of Messiah. All of these things being connected from what we would consider the Old Testament and the New Testament. God sends people out to make communications. Messiah sent out his apostles to make communications. We are making communication today just by the medium of what we have come to understand as electronic media. It's amazing. God's allowed us to have these things. These are the power of the things in the past, the power of the things in the present, the beauty of what's under Torah and what's in Messiah. These are great things that help us see that God has sent these things. And may you be blessed with this. And until next time, continue to seek God, know Messiah, and find hope.